Hi everyone. So, I talked about extroverted thinking before. Now I'm going to talk about introverted thinking. So, again, this is a judgment, not a perception. It carries an ought or a should. It is thinking, so it's external, and it is detached. And yes, people may be thinking, "Oh, introverted thinking is introverted thinking is external." Well, it is. It very much is, because it's directly shareable. It's something which you can transmit to others. Why is it that when it comes to principles, these principles can be communicated? If introverted thinking or introverted logic were not external, we wouldn't have religions or philosophies or laws of the land. We wouldn't be able to transmit structures to one another, but we can. We can because it's external. It is directly transferable. It doesn't have to be reinterpreted for us to grasp it. It's not just in the mind's eye. We think about it, but it isn't interpreted. It is very much a obvious kind of information, and it's impersonal in its nature. So yeah, introverted thinking is external and it's detached. We're thinking about it, and that's rather less controversial. Um, Now, the reason I think people get the impression that extroverted thinking is external but introverted thinking is not external, I think it comes again from Jung. I don't think that Jung was inaccurate in how he described extroverted thinking and introverted thinking. I don't think he mucked it up like introverted sensation. I think he actually was quite on point. But how he ascribed it to extroversion and introversion, I think that is more of the issue. Um, Now, what I think is definitely right, extroverted thinking is the empirical go out and don't talk to other people and find out what they think and base your opinion on that. No. Go out and observe how things are really working, gather the data, and continuously improve and revise how you are, what information, what knowledge base you have to keep up to date. That's very much extroverted thinking. And it is a looking outwards, you could say. The key thing here is that it is something which is accumulating continuously. That is the point. And the thing which is accumulated continuously is empirical data. Now, when it comes to introverted thinking, right, it is first of all introverted. So it is about refining again, not accumulating. And not only is it about refining, it is static. It is not dynamic. So it's not about change. If it does change, right, it breaks entirely and has to be completely reformed. That's completely different to extroverted thinking. Extroverted thinking was about, think of that as being almost like an avalanche of snow, and as it pours down the mountain, it's multiple moving parts coming together. It's an overall thing, but it's like a storm of ice rolling down this mountain. But all the different parts are moving around. It's accumulating more bits of terrain as it goes down. It's a bit messy, you could say, but it's very true in its messiness. It has all the bits of grit that exist. It doesn't deny any of the bits of grit that exist, but it is a mess. Extroverted thinking is about the mess of reality and how to understand that, how to apply that. Introverted thinking is not like this. Introverted thinking is where the data is cleaned up. It is turned into a structure, a framework, a model of that supposedly messy, very sort of factual, empirical reality. So introverted thinking is, it is structural. So refining things down to its underlying principles. And those principles aren't meant to be broken because the principles have to cohere with one another. And as soon as you change a principle, there's no guarantee that will cohere the rest of the principles in your theory, in your model, if you're in your framework. It will likely break the framework. So you're going to have to rebuild everything. So whereas extroverted thinking is this sort of avalanche, where it doesn't really matter what facts go in as long as they are real facts, introverted thinking is that delicate glass sculpture. It's been formed. It is something which is very much about its integrity of its structure. if you were to tap it and break off a little bit, the whole thing would shatter, fall apart, and you have to build it all up again. That is the introverted thinking approach. Introverted judgments are kind of brittle in that way. They hold to their set form, and they cannot be changed without being changed entirely, in other words, being shattered. So yes, introverted thinking is very different to extroverted thinking. It's no longer the empirical kind of thinking. It's no longer what we call a posteriori, or knowledge obtained after observation. No, now it's knowledge obtained before observation. Not necessarily before, but without, it can be done without observation. And the reason why it can be done without observation is that it's not really derived from how things are working. It is derived from what are the relationships, the logical relationships between the propositions. This is why it comes to this idea of it's more introverted in terms of it's within. It's not within me, it's not in my mind's eye. We can see the relations between propositions just by doing mathematics, right? 2 plus 2 will always equal 4. It makes no sense for 2 plus 2 to equal 5 unless you're in 1984. Unless you're in a George Orwell novel. But no, it's just as external. It's just directly shareable, but it's based on the relationships between things, and those relationships can be fractured if your model is not absolute and impossible to not be other than what it is. So when it comes to introverted thinking, theories, structures, philosophies, theologies even. There's another thing. People don't think that introverted thinking has any place in religion. Religion's a feeling thing. No. Religious ideology, where it's structure-based, and these are principles, and this is the law or structure you're meant to follow, because that is what the truth is, the real truth underneath all the sort of messy facts. That is introverted thinking. And you'll find that those people who are very principle-driven, who stick to the principles of a theory, and they don't change their view based on the situation, they will uphold their principles regardless of what the situation demands. That is introverted thinking. Because again, it's not about changing with each situation. It's not it depends on the situation. This is the truth. This is the true understanding of how things fit together. That's very much introverted thinking. Yes, and you also find it in the more sort of command control people, where introvert thinking with extrovert sensation, you can get more sort of like structure and hierarchy and all the rest. But in terms of metaphysical truth of introverted thinking, look at DNA. The code of DNA is introverted thinking. It is a structure. It has certain rules, and based on those rules, that defines what our phenotype, ordains what our phenotype's going to be. Whether I have a ginger beard despite having brown hair or not, that is very much a result of DNA. Or the laws of gravity, right? Yes, you can come to understand the laws of gravity by applying extroverted thinking, right? Good scientific processes. But as soon as you describe it as a law, in all cases, this is what happens. This is introverted thinking. And the theoretical cosmologists, not the sort of more empirical scientists who do all the testing, but the ones who come up with the theories for and models for what the universe is meant to work like, they are more introverted thinking people rather than extroverted thinking people. You'll see these differences between, say, the engineers and the experimental physicists versus the mathematicians and the theoretical physicists. That's a very clear divide between extroverted thinking and introverted thinking. And there's this idea in philosophy that a posteriori knowledge which is collected from observation, that is synthetic. That's going to tell you about how the world really works. And a priori knowledge is more analytic, in that the truth is derived from the relationships between things making it up. Perfect example, right? The human body is made up of... I've got a better one. Apparently, is an interesting one. An interesting extroverted logic fact. Yes, apparently around a third of people produce methane in their farts. So when they light their farts, it has a blue flame, and the rest of the people, it's going to be yellow because there's just sulfur. No, another gas, no methane. That's a little synthetic fact. It's something it tells you about the world. Whereas a introverted logic and a priori, analytic a priori example would be all bachelors are unmarried men, because that is exactly what a bachelor is. There's no bachelor in the world that is not an unmarried man. So that would be introverted thinking. The connections between propositions rather than the propositions themselves. That would be introverted thinking. So, yeah, that's what it's about, really. Pragmatism for extroverted thinking versus laws, structure, principles, philosophies, frameworks, and models for introverted thinking. And if you're dealing with something like typology, you're already perhaps more likely to be introverted thinking oriented. Not always. There are extroverted thinking people involved in typology who use typology very loosely in order to come up with useful self-development tips and ways to improve yourself, which is more an extroverted thinking way of sort of hijacking introverted thinking. But it's, yeah, that's the idea. Those are the differences between them. Anyway, that's introverted thinking for you. I'll do the feeling ones next. So, speak soon.